All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee budget hearing. For the record, I am Delegate Tony Bridges, the chair of the Public Safety and Administration Committee, along with my vice chair, Delegate Susie Proctor, Delegate Acevaro, and Delegate McKay, along with the vice chair of Appropriations, Delegate Mark Chang. Thank you all for being here today. We have 3 agencies that we will hear from. We're going to start with the Maryland Emergency Medical Systems Operation Fund, followed by the Department of Veterans Affairs, and finally, the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, Police and Correctional Training. What I'm going to do is have our analysts go first and give the analysis of the agency, followed by questions from our members. Members, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, make sure you raise your hand, and I will answer you in the order that you raise your hand. Following those questions, we will turn it over to the agency representatives. And just a reminder to our agency representatives, I'll call on the first person that's listed as the agency representative. Please, if there is anything that you need to respond to from the analysis, make sure you respond to that analysis report, as well as introduce the members of your panel. And so with that, I will start with the Maryland Emergency Medical Systems Operations Fund, and we'll have Ms. Madeline Miller give us the analysis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. The fiscal 2023 allowance provides for $86.1 million in total expenditures funded from the MEMSA. Moving to this pie chart on page 3. This provides a breakdown of between the 5 entities that receive MEMSA funds. Those entities are MSPAC, MIMS, the AMOS Fund, MIFRI, and the R. Adams Kelly Shock Trauma Center. In the allowance, MSPAC receives the largest share of funds at about $39.2 million, or 46% of the total. MIMS receives the next largest share, with $17.6 million, or about 21% of total expenditures. The AMOS Fund receives $15 million. It receives $15 million annually. MIFRI and the Shock Trauma Center receive about 12% and 4% of total expenditures, respectively. Exhibit 2 shows MEMSOF expenditures over the last 3 years. The total allowance grows about 5.7%, largely due to fiscal 2022 and fiscal 2023 salary enhancements, including SLEOLA negotiated COLAs, as well as statewide personnel COLAs and other enhancements. This accounts for the growth in MIMS or for most of the growth in MIMS and in MSPAC, and also a part of the growth in MIFRI's budget. I will note, however, that between the fiscal 2022 and fiscal 23, between the 2 years for MIFRI, this number is artificially high. MIFRI's allowance had a one-time decrease for the working appropriation, and MIFRI is expected to use about $835,000 in funds that were previously made available to MIFRI. Those funds were not able to be spent previously due to pandemic-related delays in class starting. So their budget is not a true 17.9% growth. Moving then to actual expenditures and actual revenues. You'll see, looking at this graph, that beginning in 2014, the Motor Vehicle Administration increased the registration fee, and revenues outpaced expenditures for a few years from 2014 through 2017. However, increase in expenditures, particularly due to personnel costs, have meant that expenditures have been outpacing revenues since about 2018, and they continue to do so in 2021. Exhibit 4 here shows the difference between the DLS 2021 appropriation and actual numbers. So our projection from last year slightly overstated the amount of actual revenue growth. Most of that is, or most of this impact comes with the MVA registration fee, and the MVA this time last year had anticipated a slightly higher revenues associated with like registering vehicles than the actual numbers were. Exhibit 5 provides a comparison of the different assumptions that DLS makes when making its forecast compared to DBMs. Notably, DBM uses a 3-year average growth rate when forecasting how much funds will grow by, particularly for MIFRI, MIMS, and for MSPAC. While DLS uses a 10-year average growth rate. There's also a slight difference in MVA registration fee and moving violation surcharge fee, just purely based on when DLS is able to pull slightly more recent data compared to DBMs, which is pulled earlier in the calendar year. You'll also then note that DLS includes the personal salary enhancements for fiscal 22 and for fiscal 23. These are not included in the DBM provided forecast. And because of that, DLS anticipates that the expenditures will only continue to outpace revenues in future year. This chart here, we have highlighted the size in which the gap that is created will grow, and DLS is forecasting that the MEMSOF will run out or will require general funds to maintain the fund starting in fiscal 2024. Because of that projected insolvency, DLS recommends the General Assembly consider legislation to influence expenditures and compared to revenues, or to offer revenue enhancements to sustain current levels of MEMSOF supported operations. I recommend this happen no later than the 2023 session. With that, I conclude my analysis, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Miller, for your thorough analysis. Do I have any questions from our members? All right, seeing none, we will turn it over to the agency, and we will start with Mr. Clay Stamp, Chairman of the Emergency Medical Services Board for MEMSOF. So,
thank you,
Mr. Stamp, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's been a year since we've talked. It's been quite an interesting year. I think we'll all agree. So as a proud member of the Maryland EMS system and the chairman of the EMS board, I just want to take a moment to thank the committee for your work and the legislature for your support. This is actually the 30th year of the MSOF fund, which is a creation of the legislature. A legislature that followed the vision of Dr. R. Adams Calley, that built the system that we have today. And on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for that. I want to recognize our partners who are critical to making a difference every day for the people in this great state that we have. When they dial 911, they get immediate access to premier life-saving services. So, you have announced our partners, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the key staff that works so hard with MIMS, R. Adams Calley Shock Trauma Center, Maryland State Police Aviation Command, the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute, and all the Maryland State firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics that are out there and represented in part by the Maryland State Firemen's Association. This has been a particularly hard 2 years for our pre-hospital care clinicians who are out there fighting the fight every day in very precarious conditions. You did hear your report from the analyst. Thank you, Ms. Miller. You did an excellent job. We appreciate that. What I would like to say is that, as I mentioned going into this, the EMS system in Maryland is something that we all are proud of. And it is a creation of the legislature. And it has been supported by legislators over the last 30 years in administrations. But we've come to a place now that if the legislature doesn't step up and help us, we're not going to be able to continue the critical services that we are able to deliver today. So my appeal is to the legislature as we roll into next year. We'll be looking to you for help. And with that being said, I know that you're on a tight timeline. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your support and be glad to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Stamp? Seeing none. I know there are a number of other agency representatives here with us today as well. So thank you, Mr. Stamp. Definitely appreciate it. We'll now have Dr. Theodore Delbridge from the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Service System.
Hey there, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity. So I'm Dr. Ted Delbridge, the Executive Director for MEMS, the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, and we're responsible for overseeing and coordinating the statewide EMS system. And we do that through promulgation of clinical protocols and medical direction, and licensing and certifying EMS clinicians, supporting educational programs, licensing commercial ambulance services, and maintaining and operating a statewide EMS communications network. I'd like to add my thanks to Ms. Miller for her comprehensive analysis, and also acknowledge Rebecca Bazzari, who's MEMS analyst from DBM. And thank you to the legislator for creating the MSOF as a distinct and sustainable source of funding for the various components of the statewide EMS system, and for continuing your support of the EMS system and its funding, which benefits every Marylander every day. Except for some grant funding, MEMS budget is nearly entirely derived from the MSOF. And for the past year, we've been particularly focused on responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, as you might expect. We've used some latitudes afforded by the governor's declarations of emergency and credentialed more than 1,200 provisional EMS clinicians who were students, people who were expired or needed expedited reciprocity, and created a regulatory pathway for them to become regularly credentialed. We revised some requirements of commercial ambulance service drivers in order to expand the fleet. We've developed paramedics and EMTs as vaccinators. They have administered more than 80,000 vaccinations to the public and 20,000 vaccinations to public safety and government personnel in continuity of operations measures. Actually, House Bill 286 seeks to extend a sunset that allows them to vaccinate. That otherwise would be 2023. We seek to extend that to 2026. We created this thing called the C4, the Critical Care Coordination Center, that tries to match patients' critical care needs with available resources in Maryland. And we've implemented a couple of things to try to take some of the burden off our overcrowded hospital emergency departments, including a protocol that helps EMS clinicians identify people suitable for going to the waiting room or the triage desk in the emergency department instead of jumping to the front of the line, a dashboard that enables paramedics and EMTs in the field to see which hospitals are or have received an influx of ambulances recently. And we're working with CRISP, the Chesapeake Regional Information System for our patients, to develop a real-time dashboard that can assess the busyness of hospital emergency departments. Our ongoing work and innovation that continually improves the emergency medical care system is made possible by the MSOF. And we look forward to collaborating with you to ensure its long-term healthy future. And I think I'd like, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, to turn over now to Major Michael Tagliaferri of the Maryland State Police Aviation Command.
Good afternoon. My name is Major Michael Tagliaferri, Commander of the Aviation Command. I would like to formally thank the committee members for their support you've provided to our department and to our partners seated virtually here before you today. The Maryland State Police Aviation Command is proud to be the leading public safety organization and essential statewide aviation services to the citizens of Maryland for the past 52 years. So our mission is to protect and improve the quality of life. It's accomplished through the airborne delivery of emergency medical, law enforcement, search and rescue, homeland security, and disaster assessment services. The department has submitted written testimony which provides some background information on our program and mission statistics for the past year. The Aviation Command, along with its partners, acknowledges the forecasted insolvency of the MSOF and is committed to working with our partners, the legislature, and the governor's office to find a long-term solution to the insolvency of the MSOF fund. Thank you for the opportunity to appear and speak before you today. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Very much, Major, and thank you also, Dr. Delbridge. Does anyone have, any of the members have any questions? I do not see any. I just want to also say that, you know, I think the pandemic taught us a lot, especially living in this virtual world. And one of the things that we get to do that we don't normally do is see the background of people that are coming before our committee. And so, Major, I'm just checking out your background. You got a lot of, you know, things back there that I wish I was there to actually look at. So
you are more than welcome to come by for a tour. We'd love to have any of you here at Aviation Command take a tour and see exactly what we do here.
I definitely appreciate it, and I'll take you up on that. Seeing no more questions from Dr. Delbridge or Major Tagliaferri, I will move on to Mr. Michael Cox Jr., Director of the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, and committee members. Again, my name is Michael Cox. I am the Executive Director of the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute here at the University of Maryland. The Maryland Fire Rescue Institute is the state's comprehensive training and education service for emergency responders. We plan, research, develop, and deliver various training programs for EMS, fire, and rescue services across our state. We typically train approximately about 34,000 emergency responders a year across the state, and that translates into about 1,900 different programs and over 750,000 instructional hours to our emergency responders. So I've also submitted written testimony, Mr. Chairman, so I won't take up too much time. I just would like to thank you and the committee members for your continued support, as well as our friends at DBM and DLS for the assistance they provide to us each year at this time. I also want to thank our MSOF partners. Although we've been doing training and we play a small role when it comes to all of our partners since 1930, it has been a tough 2 years. We have learned a lot. And one thing is true, all of us together make up the finest emergency medical services system in the nation. Hands down, nothing about it. We are the best in the nation at what we do. So I will answer any questions anyone may have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cox. Does anyone have any questions? If not, I just also want to say thank you all for the work that you do as well. If I didn't say it in the beginning, I think this is really critical for the state of Maryland, and the work that you all have talked about already and the work that you are doing just speaks volume to, you know, just everything that we believe about the Maryland emergency medical system. So thank you very much. I will now turn it over to Ms. Christy Nedeker from the Vice President of the Shock Trauma Center.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Christy Snedeker. I am the Vice President of the R. Adams Cali Shock Trauma Center at the University of Maryland Medical Center. I'm extremely pleased to be here today with my esteemed colleagues and as a part of this coalition supporting the Maryland Emergency Medical Services Operations Fund. As you heard Mr. Sam say, that MSOF has been the cornerstone of the state's capability for 30 years, which is an amazing piece of who we are here in the state, to provide every citizen abroad an uncompromised safety net. As a special protected fund, it allows the system to respond instantaneously to the variability of Maryland's political and economic fortunes. As established by state law, the R. Adams Cali Shock Trauma Center is the core element of the state's emergency medical services system and serves as the state's primary adult resource center for the treatment of trauma. Over the past 10 years, we're very proud to say that shock trauma has diverted 0 patients seeking access directly from the scene. The facility and its staff are organized for on-demand access and treatment of the state's most critically ill and injured patients to a degree unparalleled to anywhere else in the system. And as a result, the Shock Trauma Center has unique operating and financial requirements that distinguish it from any other Maryland trauma center and are the basis for this state operating support, to which we are extremely grateful. I will say and echo my colleagues here that this coalition is something extremely special to the state of Maryland and the citizens of Maryland. And I am just proud to be here alongside each and every one of them. And I thank you for your time today. You do have my written testimony, which has a little bit more information, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate you being here to speak with us as well. Do we have any questions for Ms. Nedeker? Seeing none from the panel, thank you very much. I'll now move on to Mr. Robert Phillips, the chairman for the Legislative Committee for the Maryland State Firemen's Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee. I would just like to say that, yes, we've been here for 30 years with this fund. It's done a very good job for the state of Maryland. And I'm sure most of the state don't know how much it does for them. You've got quite a panel here in front of you of partners that we do discuss, and we work together to provide the state with the service that it gets. And that's second to none. I don't care where you go. The Maryland State Firefighters Association represents the volunteer service of this partnership. And we're the firefighters, the EMS people, and the rescue people that are out here serving the citizens and guests of the state of Maryland. This fund provides funds for our members. We've got over 300 companies and 30,000 members that we represent. And this helps each and every one of them through this fund provide a better service and an ongoing service. And everybody says thank you to you and the work and the legislator that you do for us and keep us out on the streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Phillips? Seeing none, I will like to thank everyone for being here today. Again, just to reiterate, the work that you do is really important, and we want to make sure that you can continue the work that you do for the citizens in the state of Maryland. So thank you all very much for the work, and thank you for your attention today. That will conclude the hearing for the Maryland Emergency Medical Systems Operations Fund. We will now move on to the Department of Veterans Affairs. And with that, we will have Mr. Andrew Garrison give the analysis for the agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I am pulling up the analysis here, I do want to take the opportunity as well to thank the folks at the Department of Veterans Affairs. It really is a pleasure to work with them every year on pulling this together, and we know the work that they do for the state as well. In front of you, you should be seeing the department's budget. We have a $50 million budget in front of us, which is showing a $10 million increase this year. That's a pretty sizable increase for these folks. It's about a 25% increase. And we can really attribute that to two major things, one of which is one-time funding that's coming in for cemetery contracts, and in particular, the grounds maintenance and raising and realignments of the cemetery headstones throughout the state. And then some other dollars are coming in to revenue support grant for the contractor of Charlotte Hall's Veteran Home, and we'll be getting into that a little bit more in depth. But first, looking at how some of this budget breaks down, here in Exhibit 1, we're showing you the overview of that. A lot of the dollars are concentrated really in two places. Those two items that are growing that I talked about at the top. First, we have the Veterans Home Program that operates about 60% of this total budget. And a lot of those dollars are actually dollars that end up coming in through the federal government and then are paid out for the treatment of veterans in the state's care at our home. And then the cemetery program is also another sizable expense there of this budget. And that's because they have a lot of the personnel within this budget. They have 77 positions in the current appropriation, and that is about 2/3 of the total employees that we have here at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Moving on to the Exhibit 2, this is where we really focus on that change. And there are, again, a few things to highlight here. First, towards the middle of your screen, you see the the dollars coming in for the cemetery program for the headstone realignment throughout the veteran cemeteries. It's about $8 million. And then we have another $2 million coming in for the an increase rather in the Charlotte Hall Veterans Home operating contractor grants. And then additionally, we do have some personnel expenses, and those end up netting to a positive because we do have a decrease in the turnover adjustment, but that negative 113 I actually want to talk about really briefly. In fiscal 22, there were some salary adjustments and enhancements to help with the recruitment and retention of cemetery caretakers in particular. Again, the cemetery program has a large share of this agency's budget, and a lot of those are folks who are working to maintain the grounds of our state veteran cemetery. And those have been positions that have been really hard to recruit and retain for, in part because they are fairly low wage relative to other state employees. And so there has been some difficulty maintaining having those positions filled. And so we are asking the department to comment on some ongoing efforts for recruitment and retention there. Again, they are a large share of the positions and also do end up kind of driving the vacancy rates and other personnel challenges we see within this budget. Moving on to the discussion of Charlotte Hall's Veteran Home. First, as you all know, Charlotte Hall's Veteran Home is the state's only veterans home. It is a state that is a facility that's really unique in our state. It has the care of aging veterans, and it's a relatively large facility, both in the scheme of nursing homes and similar type facilities in the state, but also in the campus itself. It's down in St. Mary's County. It's a gorgeous facility. And in the earlier phases of the pandemic in particular, like most other nursing homes in the state, Charlotte Hall Veterans Home had a really difficult time, particularly in those really early phases. Unfortunately, there were a significant amount of resident fatalities there, as well as cases and spreads that occurred and spread of the disease that occurred throughout. And we do see that as the virus progressed, any sort of surges were relatively minimal. Better infection controls were put in place. We understood better the nature of the disease and were able to mitigate some of those impacts, but it really did have a substantial impact again in those early days in 2020. And so with that, of course, there was an impact on the folks that were staying in the home in the resident census at Charlotte Hall. And that's what we show here in Exhibit 4. And this is interesting or important for a couple of reasons. One, the payment and the operational structure of Charlotte Hall is fairly unique as well. The state has a small number of actual state employees there, and a lot of the operations is done by a contractor who is paid for by the federal government will pay for the care of veterans in the state's care. And so we get those dollars, and the state then passes those on through to the contractor themselves to maintain their operations. And then in return, what the contractor does is leases the beds back from the state. And so what that allows for the state is a more stable revenue source. We know exactly how much we're getting from the contractor because it's just based off of the number of beds, not based on how many people are filling those beds at any given time. And the contractor is able to then use those dollars that is coming in through the federal government to provide services at the home. And what is implicit in that is that the sort of any impact from census and has a revenue impact therefore on the contractor, not the state, because the state is just getting paid on a kind of a per bed basis, not necessarily on a filled bed basis. And so when we saw a decline in resident census, the contractor had an immediate revenue hit to that. And so for the last couple of years now, there's been additional revenue support provided to that contractor. A lot of this has been provided through federal dollars, particularly the federal flexible spending dollars that have come in either through CARES or the State Fiscal Recovery Fund. And that's what we're showing you here in Exhibit 5. And of course, this is a revenue support, given that the revenue is really closely tied to the resident census, which of course did have that downturn that we saw throughout the pandemic, not only because of any sort of fatalities that may have occurred at facilities, but also individuals might have been less comfortable with their loved ones being in a congregate living facility, given the nature of the pandemic, or admissions just might have been slower and have really yet to recover in a meaningful way. And so what we've plotted on here for you is the grants to the contractor. In total, right now, it's planned to be about $10 million over the course of these 3 fiscal years. And then where the occupancy percent is. As we showed above, the occupancy is still fairly low, but in the current budget data, that occupancy is expected to be increasing, getting closer to where it is traditionally. Right now, it's forecasted to be above 80%. Usually, prior to the pandemic, we saw this facility around 90%. And so we're going to put a pin in this. But this is really something that DLS wanted to highlight because as the census and at the facility begins to rebound, we would expect perhaps less of a revenue deficit being caused for the contractor. And so the other thing we wanted to highlight when looking at this home, again, given that it is such a unique facility within our state, is looking at vaccinations, particularly as it relates, of course, to COVID-19. But to foreground that, we've actually traditionally received data on vaccination rates for the flu vaccine. Every year we receive it for this facility. And the facility does traditionally perform really, really well in terms of vaccinating all the residents against the flu. And so with that in mind, we looked at the vaccination rates for residents within the facility for the COVID-19 vaccine. This is data that the CMS collects on all nursing homes. And so what we were able to do is we were able to compare the vaccination rate of Charlotte Hall to the other nursing homes in St. Mary's County, as well as the rest of the nursing homes in the state. And what we're showing is a share of any resident who is either fully, partially vaccinated or unvaccinated. And we can see that this facility did really well, particularly if we focused on residents unvaccinated. They were able to vaccinate almost all of the residents in the home. However, when we look at the staff vaccination rates, the number of unvaccinated or the share of unvaccinated staff at Charlotte Hall is lower when compared to those other nursing homes in the county, as well as those statewide. And then to reiterate, because the contractor is doing a lot of the operations here, these folks that we're capturing here under the staff that CMS is capturing under staff aren't necessarily state employees, but individuals who are working through the contractor to provide care at the facility. So tying all those together with Charlotte Hall, DLS has a recommendation here for budget bill language, particularly restricting funds, $2 million of that additional contractor fund. Again, there's about $4 million slated for this year, pending a report on Charlotte Hall veterans, in part really to gain insight on how this facility handled the pandemic, given that it is a very unique facility. It is really the only state-run facility that looks like a nursing home, which we know was an acute crisis point during the early phase of the pandemic. But then also to include a discussion around some of those revenue supports, what the kind of formula was used to come up with those numbers, and the need for continued support if we do see that resident census rebound in fiscal 23. And then lastly, also a discussion again of the COVID-19 vaccination rollout, both in terms of the successes among having the residents being higher vaccinated than any other comparable facilities in the state on a rate basis, but then also maybe some of the challenges in getting those staff, those people working in the home through the contractor vaccinated as well, to make sure that we can be keeping those residents safe there. That ultimately concludes our analysis for this budget, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Garrison. That was a very thorough analysis. I do have one question before I ask any of the members. In terms of the occupancy rate, I know you said that there were a number of factors that could have contributed to individuals leaving. Was there, do you know if the agency or Charlotte Hall did any sort of, I guess, exit interview to kind of gauge why people were leaving?
I don't know if the exit interview process occurred exactly. I'm sure the folks from the home are here and can expand on that. I do know there was also a period of time where they weren't admitting new folks because of an infection control standpoint. So that also might have slowed any recovery that we might have seen in terms of rebounding a resident census. But in terms of other specific reasons, I don't have that offhand. No, thank you.
That makes sense. And I'll ask them as well. Do any of the other members have any questions for Mr. Garrison? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for your analysis. I will now turn it over to the Honorable George Owings, III, Secretary for the Department of Veterans Affairs. How you doing, Mr. Secretary?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to be here, as it always is. With me today is Deputy Secretary Finn to my right. Also, to answer the specific questions about the home is our Director, Michelle Carriasso, just below you on the screen. And to the right of her is our Director of Finance and Human Resources, Pete Pantzer. I want to thank Andrew for his very thorough and always on the spot, thoughtful analysis of the governor's budget. And that's the truth. That's not a backslap. That's true. I want to start by saying something. I'm not going to take a lot of your time like I never do, but it's important for me to say this. When the West, Washington State, was hit with the pandemic, that was the first place in the country it raised its ugly head. We almost immediately shut down Charlotte Hall. We had over 400 residents at that time. And while the loss was 61 during that pandemic, there were homes across this country that were half our size and smaller that lost far more residents than we lost. We took aggressive action immediately, and I'm very proud of what we were able to do, but we couldn't have done it alone. I see Secretary Greene is on the thing here. Among other things, he sent us masks, but in addition to that, he has provided us with the land for our second home in Sykesville, and I want to thank him and his folks for that, of course. I want to thank Secretary Schrader for what the Department of Health did. I want to thank General Gowan for sending down the strike team, the medical strike team. So it was an all hands on deck for us during the initial outbreak and continuing on. Dr. Brewster at the Health Department in St. Mary's County was most helpful and still is. With all of that said, let me say that I do concur with the governor's budget fully. And as far as testimony goes, there's 5 programs. Let me just very quickly, you have our testimony here, but let me just say very quickly, of the 5 programs, outreach and advocacy, cemetery and memorials, the Charlotte Hall Veterans Home, the trust fund, and services and benefits all play a part in making the department what the department is. But getting back to the cemetery program, you all should be very proud to know that this state has 5 veteran cemeteries. Those 5 cemeteries bury, listen to me, 10% of all veterans in the United States and 5 territories that are buried in state cemeteries. You see, we only have 1 national cemetery left, National Cemetery in Baltimore. Every other veteran that wishes to be buried in a veteran cemetery comes to us. Recently, we just buried 9 unclaimed remains at Crownsville. We were happy to accept them. There was a big ceremony, it rained, and we had over 400 people attend that ceremony. The following Friday, we had another unclaimed remains burial in where was it, Bob? Garrison Forest, where 7 more were properly attended to. We take our burials very, very seriously. And I always took great pleasure in calling the governor when we had 8 inches of snow and said, Governor, you won't be there, I'm sure, and a lot of people won't either. And some of the homes, the funeral homes have canceled burials. But I want you to know we're open for visitation today. Not once, except one time about 6 years ago, have we ever closed our cemeteries. So in any event, you have our written testimony. I want to thank everybody. I've gone on longer than I usually do, but I'm very proud of the way that this department runs and the strides that we make. Michelle is here to answer any questions about the home. She can give you the current vaccination rates. And of course, Pete's here on, I want him to do, I do want him to mention 2 new hires that came in that we're very, very fortunate to have. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it over to Michelle and Pete. Michelle?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michelle Carriaso. I'm the director for Charlotte Hall Veterans Home, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have regarding the presentation.
Pete? Pete?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. I also just want to say thank you. And the department was thrilled in the last 2 months to welcome 2 new staff to our offices in Annapolis. We were privileged to bring in a second procurement officer. When this administration started, we had none, and we had a lot of need for one. And we were able to borrow a position to create one 6 years ago. And the lieutenant governor got behind our request to bring in a second procurement officer. which serves the entire agency. And the one I'm most excited about is because it directly affects me, is we were able to bring in an employee relations manager for the first time in the agency's history. And that person will be a huge help dealing with an increased, a workforce of increasing size that is located in small teams all over the state. And I'm just thrilled to have a complete team in our unit in Annapolis. I'd like to just come back very quickly to the question that was asked about ongoing efforts to improve recruitment and retention in the cemetery program. We've detailed this in the analysis. Let me say in about 2 sentences that 2 years ago, we had 39 grounds personnel, and they had been with the state an average of 4 years. 2 years later, that number is 48, and the elapsed time with the state is up to 4.5 years. DBM has been very helpful in supporting us in a number of ways. We continue to work on a number of initiatives, or we have and continue to work on a number of initiatives to improve this. So we have some work to do, but we're definitely headed in the right direction. Happy to take any questions.
Very much. Definitely sounds like you're moving in the right direction in terms of bringing on staff. Definitely appreciate it. Do we have any questions from any of the members? All right, seeing none, unless you have anything else, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, there's one other thing. He does handle the personnel, but I wanted to also let everyone know that we were very fortunate to go over and steal someone from labor. Rosalind Jones has joined our department as a female or woman veteran inclusion program director. And we are so fortunate to have her. We have how many, 54,000 women veterans in this state. And heretofore, they've just been lumped in with everybody else. Now we have a standalone person who deals strictly with the female veteran. And I tell you, we are just so happy to have her on board. So we are definitely making strides in that area. I want to thank you very much for your time and attention today. And with that, we are concluding.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for the work that you're doing, especially for our veterans. Definitely appreciate all of your hard work and your responses to the analysis today. So thank you for being here. With that, that'll conclude our hearing for the Department of Veteran Affairs. We will now begin our hearing for the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, Police and Correctional Training. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jacob Cash to give us the analysis.
I believe I'm sharing my screen now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, I'll be going over the budget analysis for the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, Police and Correctional Training Commissions. These are two distinct quasi-dependent commissions within the department with a total budget allowance of $10.7 million in fiscal 2023. The budget changes only slightly from the working appropriation, and I'll be going into that in just a second. The overall agency spending, a majority of it goes towards operating expenses and salaries for those who staff the Public Safety Education and Training Center in Sykesville, that is PCTC's location. And there are appropriations every year to the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission Police Training Fund of $2 million. Now, for this fund, it's the first issue we'd like to talk about today. Majority of the issue is that PCTC is not spending down this money as quickly as we might have expected. And we'd like them to go into more detail on how they plan on spending this fund. As you can see in the yellow bars next to the green bars, which represent the fund balance, actual spending has fallen far below appropriations each year they've received them. The first year, the funds were received late. But since then, the department has been slow in expending these funds. Just to remind you, this was a fund established by the General Assembly. It receives $2 million from specified legal fees every year. And its purpose is to revamp and transform the police training that we provide in the state. In terms of the budget allowance, like I mentioned, there's only small changes in a few items. Majority of those are for personnel. Regarding vacancies, In fiscal 2022, we saw an increase in vacancies, although the department has mentioned that those have reduced down to 8 currently, but it is still higher than the turnover expectancy. Back to this MPTSC fund, essentially there have been a few simulators bought, driving training course simulators, scenario simulators for police training, which will be especially helpful since there are new training and standards related to use of force as required by the General Assembly. But the majority of spending goes towards a learning management system replacement. This is the main electronic system used by the commissions. It not only tracks what they teach at the commissions, but it tracks the certification of officers for both police and correctional officers, and tracks their certifications from other states. So in increasing the capabilities of this system is definitely in the states and in the commission's best interest, and it's a good use of the police training fund. The main issue, obviously, again, is that we think that they could be using this money more or for more transformative items. So DLS is asking the department to comment on their strategic plan for this fund and how they plan to expand the funds in the future. Just shortly on the performance evaluation, there have been an increase in entry-level correctional training academies in 2021. They doubled them out from 2020. Partially that's because of the delay of some academies in 2020 that were pushed to 2021, but it's also because correctional officer hiring has increased since the lows that you see in 2016, 17, and 18. And in terms of classroom utilization, overall, there has been a decline in 2021 related to COVID-19. It's the first full year of those lockdowns. However, there's also, it's good to see that skill areas have gone down a little bit. They were overbooked, even above the level in 2020 for many years. And so it's good to see the booking rate for those go down so that people can timely receive their driving certification. And I'll also mention for the labs and simulators, we're expecting more of those in the future. So the utilization may go down more in the future, but more opportunities are available for training at the Public Safety Education Training Center. There's more information in the Appendix 2 on the Learning Management System Replacement Project. It is a major IT project, but other than those details, my presentation is concluded. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Very much, Mr. Cash. Do have a quick question before I ask any of the other members. For the unexpended dollars that you were talking about earlier, where are those dollars, I guess, specific as to what sort of training it should be used on? Could it be for capital to, create another space for them to use? Like, I'm not sure what those training dollars should go to.
Right, that's a good question. So they must use the dollars on enhancing the current training. So they can't simply replace normal operating funds and only have, they can't replace general funds with the special fund. But what they can do is, like you said, start a construction project. So I mentioned the driver training course. That has been one aspect of police and correctional training in the state that is a little bit deficient. There aren't that many publicly available ones. And the one at PCTC is pretty much in constant use. So if they were to expand that or create a new area that they can enhance training, that would be a great use of this fund. There's also any number of additional one-time training events that they could start and have special contracts with other agencies, memorandums of understanding, so that anybody who regularly wants training at PCTC, they can do that. And even if they're not a correctional officer or a police officer in the state, they can still receive training that will enhance public safety in the state.
Yep, thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Mr. Cash from any of the members? Seeing none, thank you very much for your analysis, Mr. Cash. I will now turn it over to the secretary, Mr. Robert Greene. The floor is yours, sir. Good to see you.
You as well. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Bridges, Vice Chair Proctor, members of the House Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Robert Greene. I'm the Secretary of the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. We have a bit larger than usual group here with me today, so I'd ask your indulgence so I can go through and make some introductions. Thought it very important for you to meet some of our newest leaders at PCTC. With me today virtually is Sasha Vasquez, our Acting Deputy Secretary of Administration, Rachel Sessa, Chief of Staff, Ms. Nigel Roberts, our Chief Financial Officer, Wayne Silver, Director of the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission, and Alan Beard, Director of the Correctional Training Commission, along with Executive Director Al Liebno, who assists in overseeing both commissions and the Public Safety Training Facility where we are headquartered in Sykesville. The department, as well as both commissions, appreciate the ongoing collaboration and the thoughtful analysis by Mr. Cash. As you know, the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission is a quasi-independent body from the department. While I'm not a member of the commission, the agency shares staff and supports the commission in terms of assisting with finance, procurement, human resources, and IT. I want to thank Mr. Cash for noting that we currently have 8 vacant full-time positions at PCTC, not 13. The majority of these vacancies are new, as 6 of them became vacant in the last 2 quarters of calendar year 2021, and we will continue to work to fill these positions. With regard to the analysis, there was one issue that DLS asked us to comment on, which is to expand on our vision and plan to expend the MPTSC fund resources while enhancing police training programs. To be clear, statutorily, this is up to the members of the commission to determine how to spend the funds. So I'd like to turn it over to Director Silver to respond to this issue. Before doing so, I'd also like to say that the department concurs with the recommended action, which is to concur with the governor's allowance. Director Silver.
Thank you, Secretary Greene. The commission did not receive its first tranche of funding until the beginning of fiscal year 2020. Since the beginning of fiscal year 2020, the commission has expended $526,019 from its special funds. As stated in the analysis, a significant amount of that fund balance will be utilized for the implementation and subsequent maintenance of the new learning management system, LMS. We have set aside $2 million from the fund to offset the cost of the LMS. However, the department recently received bids on a 5-year contract, a contract that would cover implementation and maintenance of the LMS. The bids received range between $6.3 and $26 million. So the MPTSC funds will be critical for this project. The commission also plans on utilizing a significant portion of its remaining fund balance to enhance training efforts by upgrading equipment and technology. To enhance police training, the commission plans on purchasing 3 additional virtual training simulators at a cost of $80,000 per unit for a total purchase cost of $240,000. The driving training facility also needs maintenance and upgrades in order to accommodate continued expansion of police recruit training needs and in-service training components. The commission estimates that enhancing training at the current driver training facility will cost $400,000. Additionally, the firearms facility, which is over 20 years old, needs technological and equipment upgrades. The commission has identified the need for 2 judgmental decision systems with new technology that provides greater instructor interaction and student de-escalation options. The commission is also seeking to upgrade the electronic range target system and range shoot house, which is a live fire decision-making training arena, by adding a system that allows the walls to be reconfigured. Not only would this enhance training realism and instructor flexibility, but it would allow the training environment to change to address specific objectives. These upgrades to the firearms facility are projected to cost somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000. Collectively, these enhancements will allow the Commission to improve the quality and effectiveness of training, specifically in the areas of scenario-based training, while ensuring training is in accordance with all legal requirements. The incorporation of a real-time instructor-student interaction will greatly assist in improving de-escalation training and evaluation by building on the strengths and improving the weaknesses in officer response to tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving situations. Officer post-incident, to include duty of care responsibilities, can be monitored and evaluated in real time with this technology to ensure a firm comprehension of their responsibilities and the understanding of the sanctity of human life. Because the technology allows multiple students and virtual role players, officers can easily be evaluated in realistic scenarios involving use of force and their duty to intervene. So we do have a vision, and we will continue to work with the department on utilizing the funds to make these training enhancements. Thank you. Secretary?
Chairman Bridges, that is our testimony, and we're here for any of your questions.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Silver, for your explanation as well. You have a question in terms of the number of projects that you just listed. Obviously there'll be lag time as you put these out for bid. Do you have a sort of a timeline as to when you expect these projects to either go out for bid or to come online?
Thank you for your question, Chairman. Some of the things that in the bigger picture are smaller, like the virtual realities, we're going to move on them as quickly as we can. A lot of the bigger ticket items are going to really depend on the LMS system, because initially that's going to be a big portion of the budget. So we're going to have to kind of see where that comes in for bid before we can move on the other projects.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, where we're at with that is that project is at procurement right now. Bids have been received and it's in the process. So it is moving right along, and that provides us really a tremendous ability to track and account for all of the training dimensions and existing and new legislation.
Thank you for that response. I see Vice Chair Proctor has her hand raised. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Secretary Greene and Secretary Silver. I have no idea what the simulators are used to in this training process. So I'm asking, what kind of training will the simulators be used for? And what kind of data are you looking at that says you need 3 more simulators?
Thank you for your question. Well, we're looking at a couple things. First, I'll start with the first part of it. What will the scenarios do? Well, actually, the way the virtual scenarios work nowadays, the sky's the limit. We can take pretty much any scenario that in the past we would have needed multiple role players in an area to perform, and we can do it virtually. That's going to be especially important in the time of COVID, because we don't need as many role players and it's a safer environment to do it. Now, as far as why do we need 3 of them? Well, we're taking on a lot of training with the police reform, dealing with the police accountability boards, the charging committees, the trial boards, and we're establishing flyaway teams that will be able to go and train the members of those boards. And we feel it's imperative as part of that training for that to put them in some of those realistic scenarios that officers are going to be involved in, so they can see how the human performance aspects apply.
Well, thank you very much. A simulator is, I just think maybe it's something you get in there and for 15, 20 minutes and you know how to do it, but obviously that's not the way it works, but thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
If I may, Madam Vice Chair, we would invite the members of this subcommittee to, it's a rather unique experience to see and understand. And anytime members of this subcommittee or any of our legislative leaders would like to come down and see it, Mr. Liebner would be happy to host you. We've done that on a regular basis last year, this year, and we'll continue to do so.
I think that would be a good site visit, Mr. Chair.
I totally agree with you, Madam Vice Chair. It sounds like we got our site visit coming up. So thank you very much. Did you have further questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
I do have a question as we continue to talk about the training, though. I know you had mentioned the de-escalation training. Can you sort of talk about the, I guess, whether or not there's cultural competency training as well? And is that part of the de-escalation training, or is that something totally separate?
Thank you for the question, Chairman. Actually, it is, because all academies in the state, to include the one that we run, the cultural competency is through the entire academy. And de-escalation training really isn't a 2-hour block of instruction. It's something that starts at day one of the academy and goes through the entire 24, 25, 30 week of the academy. So it is, and that's part of those virtual reality things. They allow you to put them in different scenarios and gauge and evaluate. And the unique thing with them is that when they react a certain way, the instructor has the ability to change what's happening in the scenario based off of their reaction, and it allows them to deal with the issue, if there is an issue, right away from a training and student standpoint.
Something maybe we'll see that in action when we come do a site visit.
Certainly.
Looks like Delegate Proctor has another question. You're on mute.
We hear so much about our officers having to go in with mental health issues, mental health crisis. Mm-hmm. Is your training inclusive of a type of training that would help officers to know how to approach someone in a mental health crisis?
Absolutely. We teach many blocks of instruction on that, to include individuals with developmental disabilities, where the officers are placed in situations where they have to, first of all, identify that there is an issue or an area of concern, and then handle it properly. And that's one of those areas where they're evaluated not just on a written examination, but they have to actually perform the functions in order to master the objectives.
Great, thank you.
And if I may, Madam Vice Chair, on both sides, police and correction, under the leadership of Director Beard, it's a strong focus in the Correctional Academy as well. And that's an excellent question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Do any of the other members have any questions? All right, seeing none, I would just say I would like to just get a better sense of the timeline of when those projects might actually be moving. Sounds like there are a number of projects would definitely take up the amount that we're talking about of the $2 million over the years. I just want to make sure that we have sort of a strategic long-range plan as to how we expend those funds. And so I don't know if you'd be able to provide something like that gives us more of a timeline on the expenditure of those funds. I think that might be helpful for the committee.
We'd be happy to do that, Mr. Chair.
It seems there are no other questions for you, Mr. Secretary. Do you have any final words before we end the hearing?
No, thank you all very much, and wish you a very good day.
Thank you very much. We wish you the same. That will conclude the hearing for Department of Public Safety and Corrections Police and Correctional Training. That will also conclude our budget hearings for the day. I want to thank our members as well as our analysts and our representatives from the agencies as always. And I will ask that you all actually have a really good afternoon and a great rest of the week as well. Have a good day.